Three, two, one. And how are you doing today, Dr. Brian?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm very glad you made the trip up from Irvine. It's wonderful to have you in West Hollywood.
Yeah, it was a nice trip here. I don't get to come down here often, but it's beautiful down here. Got to make it more down.
Yeah, it's where all the action is. That's for sure. Especially like Beverly Hills, West Hollywood. It's like all the bars, the restaurants, the nightlife.
The iconic restaurants here. Before I came here, I asked one of my friends who works down here, said, "Please give me an iconic restaurant to go while I'm down here." And so I'm gonna see what he responds to later.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You'll find something.
Yeah. Yeah, the food up down LA is just doesn't compare to other parts.
So how's 2024 looking for you so far? Because I know we've come out of pandemic, and the writer's strike and the actor's strike, and this whole city has kind of been paralyzed for the last few years. But you're a little bit out of the city, but you're still working, probably with some people in entertainment, perhaps. I mean, how's it been for you?
2024, gratefully, has actually been really good. 2023 was a little rough on many levels with clients and people and just people getting sick or just a lot of different events, people losing their jobs and for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And 2024, for a lot of people, whether it be clients, myself, personally, friends, it's been sort of an upswing. And so a lot of good stuff happening. I don't know if whatever people's belief systems are. I know I have some friends who are Chinese. I said, yeah, this is the year. And so, but 2024 has been gratefully well for me, health-wise, family-wise, professional, and seems to be a breakout year for a lot of people. So,
have you won any jiu-jitsu tournaments so far this year? That's the real key.
Well, I did compete in my first tournament. It was in LA, and I did win first place in what we call the open class. That is an open division where same age bracket, belt. But it's an open weight class, so anybody in that age range and belt class can compete if you qualify in the first three. And so I did. I got second place in my division, and then I went ahead and won the open class at that tournament.
So that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm always like fascinated by people who do like karate, jiu-jitsu, or some kind of taekwondo, or like any of these kind of combative sports, because it's so beyond me in so many ways. Probably because I just haven't put in the time and the effort to like really give it a try. But I love just hearing the stories about how people got into these sports and how they've kind of progressed them, and then how important it is actually for them to stay in it as like adults with families and jobs and all this, because it's really like an outlet for all the stress and all the difficulty that it is just living in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. Yes, martial art, anything competitive, especially athletics, but martial arts as well is just a different level of focus, but it's great for your right mind, body, spirit. With a lot of things, you're rock climbing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I have not rock climbed per se, but I know friends that do, and they just talk about how impactful it is spiritually for them, mentally, physically as well. And I was telling you earlier, whenever I hear someone who's a rock climber got to roll within jiu-jitsu, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a rough one, because the grip strength you guys have and the leg strength to be able to do what you do is actually a huge advantage.
So what we'll do is I'll come down to the jiu-jitsu training center. You'll pump me up as this rock climbing guy who's just shown up out of nowhere, right? And I'll just suck, and then everyone just kick my ass.
Okay.
So look, I don't know anything about you. Obviously, I've checked. We've been kind of connected, and we got connected through a third party. And but I'd love to kind of learn about how you ended up in Southern California, and choosing the career path you've chosen, which is to to help people to work as a therapist and focus on the various things that you focus on. But where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Ohio.
Okay.
I'm born and raised in Ohio. For anyone out there who is familiar with Ohio, it's a small little town called Hamilton, and was there for the first 12 years of my life. My father moved out to California with the family for work opportunities, and we had more family and just more opportunities in general. And so I came out here, moved to the city of La Palma, California, and then eventually to the city of Orange. And so I've been here, went to high school, college, graduate school. Then I went back east. I part of my life, I wanted to kind of get away from California a little bit and see what else out there. And so I ended up going to graduate school in Oklahoma and spent quite a few years there, and did some training in Kansas City, Missouri, and back here in California. So that was kind of my trajectory there. And my path wasn't straight to becoming a psychologist for sure. I went through many years in my 20s of wondering what I wanted to do. Law enforcement was one of the things I wanted to do. And then medical school was one of the things that I was entertaining. And then I stumbled upon this field because I was doing this work already as an undergraduate. And I was actually in another PhD program called Industrial Organizational Psychology, which is look at behavior in the workplace. Wasn't a great fit for me, and I transitioned to the clinical program. And so this is how I ended up here. It wasn't a straight path, but it is the path that I believe I'm destined to be on.
The right path is never a straight and easy one. No. That's for sure.
Yeah, that is for sure.
So I make TV shows all around the world, and people watch them all around the world. So the audience today is pretty global. So a lot of people out there might not really know where Ohio is. So, obviously on the East Coast of the United States, we have New York City. On the West Coast of the United States, we have Los Angeles, San Francisco. And then in the middle of the country, we have Ohio.
Midwest.
It's a Midwest, baby.
Midwest. For those of you who don't know, Midwest is near Kentucky and around those. So Midwest, and Oklahoma is considered a southern part. So
yeah. And Ohio is just south of Illinois and Chicago, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
For all those frequent flyers out there who go through the Chicago airport.
Exactly. If you visit Ohio, iconic Skyline Chili in Cincinnati, Ohio. Have you been to Ohio?
I have, actually. I gave a talk in Cincinnati, Ohio, a couple of years ago before COVID, maybe 2017 or 18, and it was my first trip there, and I loved it. The community in Cincinnati was great. I think I spoke at a country club. It was pretty posh, actually, but it was a lot of fun. Met a lot of really nice people.
Skyline Chili, no, wasn't on your radar.
No, I didn't do Skyline Chili.
It's iconic, so it's one of those things.
So what was it like growing up in Ohio, in the Midwest, kind of in the center of the United States? What's the perspective like growing up kind of in somewhere like that versus being in a New York or now in LA, where maybe you have interaction with people from all over the world on a more regular basis?
Well, as I reflect upon that, definitely as someone that was growing up there, didn't have a great life perspective, but now that I look at it, have some reflection and thoughts about it. But Ohio was predominantly white, and we grew up in that small town, and so actually someone of color, of Asian or Asian Indian descent or African American was rare where I lived. But the people were very nice, very down to earth. That's what I remember a lot of. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize until I moved to California, wow, it's so much part of the United States. There's so much more diversity, obviously in California. I'm Filipino, and it's my race. And just coming out to California, of all the melting pot of ethnicities and race and cultures, was a big eye shocker to me. But I enjoyed Ohio. I went back there for my 8th grade reunion, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. That's a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing. Well, it's a thing when you go to a Catholic school from 1st to 8th grade. And about 15 or years ago, we had an 8th grade reunion, and it was wonderful and connecting with everyone. It's amazing how you still see that person that was 30, 40 years ago is still in them. The jokes are the same. The comedy's the same, but we all changed in many ways. But that was really enjoyable, and we're actually trying to plan. I'm trying to at least plan the next one.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Good to remember our roots.
So I had a thing. I left Canada. I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and then went to school there and stuff like that. And then when I turned 22, I moved to China. So I lived in Shanghai, China for 18 years. Yeah.
I speak the language.
When I was there, I could get around, but now I've kind of totally lost it. But it's funny. I was speaking to someone just yesterday or the day before who I went to high school with. And I was like, man, I'm finally back in North America after 25 years of being abroad. Is there any high school reunions coming up or anything of where I could catch up with everyone? Because I've really been gone. And she's like, no, we don't, our grade that we were in is like the only grade that doesn't do high school reunions because everyone still hangs out together, except for me. So I'm on the outside looking in, and I was like, well, how do I get back and get back in touch with some of these people that I went to school with and played rugby with and played basketball with, and they're quite good friends at the time. But I find it amazing that your 8th grade school is having, because I don't even remember who I went to grade school with.
You can start that back. My brother is a Toronto, born in Toronto, Canada, so he's a Canadian citizen.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah,
and so he lived there before he went to Ohio. Just to let you know.
Oh, so your parents are from the Philippines?
Yes.
Okay, whereabouts in the Philippines, if you don't mind me asking?
No. My mom is from Cebu.
Okay.
And my dad was from Manila, is where he identifies with.
Mm-hmm.
So they were there, and they actually met in the States in their respective works and training.
I love the Philippines. Like Cebu is obviously stunning because it's like a great place for scuba diving and snorkeling, and the ocean is just completely gorgeous and pure and beautiful.
Some of the best beaches, white sand beaches, as you know.
Yeah.
I don't know about mountain climbing there, but
mountain climbing is not bad actually. So I actually filmed an episode of one of my TV shows in Mindanao.
Oh, Mindanao.
In Philippines, and we climbed Mount Apo, which is the highest mountain in the Philippines. It wasn't very high, but it was a great kind of show because it was one of the only times where we were able to go from the sea level, the ocean. So I put my feet in the ocean, and then we kind of started walking, and then a few days later we made it up to the top of the highest mountain in the Philippines. So we literally went from sea level to that country's highest point.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course the people in Mindanao, we were in Davao, right? In Davao, yeah. So and the people there were just spectacular. And of course, the more time you live in Asia and spend time in Asia, you realize that the Filipino people are everywhere. Like the greatest export the Philippines has is Filipino people, because they are all over Asia, all over the Middle East, all over North America, doing amazing work, always happy, always cheerful, always amazing. It's really quite lovely.
Service industries like cruise ships and so forth. That's
And in the middle, because I was living in Dubai for the last few years, and there were a lot of Filipino people also working in the medical industry, a lot of nurses and things like this. Yeah.
Yeah, Filipino nurses. We dominate that field in some levels in terms of that. But
so your parents met in the United States, moved to Ohio, then you were born, and then what was it like actually going from Ohio to California? Because that's a big jump for a lot of people. I mean, the United States is huge and diverse, but being on the West Coast is quite different than being in the Midwest.
It is. It was, and luckily we had family friends that were here that transitioned from Ohio, that were kind of here a little bit, got their feet wet. So it wasn't a major. Everything is brand new to us. So they introduced us to friends, but a lot of things were just different. Just freeways, right? In Ohio, 2-lane freeways, right? Some just 1 lane each. And then you come here, there's 7 lanes. Like I said, just a diversity of food, the accessibility to things. In Ohio, we had to drive somewhere. I literally went back for my 8th grade reunion, and that was about 20 plus years later. And I never drove there, and I was able to drive based on just my memory as a child, because not much changed. It was just still authentic and still the same way. And I found my way back to our home, and we didn't have a Siri yet or Google Maps when I visited, and I was able just to go on straight memory. And
that's amazing.
But you come back to California 2 years later, or 3 years later, let alone 20 years later, you're going to get lost.
Yeah.
And so, but the diversity was a real big factor for me. It was funny because when I went to high school in Bellflower, California, and my brother and I, we kept saying please and thank you, and our friends would tease us like, you guys are so polite. I'm like, that's what we do, say please and thank you. And so it was amazing. Luckily we had a lot of people that supported us and helped transition. It was great having the other Filipino community embrace us as well.
It's interesting. Like, a lot of people probably think the United States is full of, these rough, tough, angry people, but actually, you really only find that in the big cities, right? Because I think globally, everyone who lives in a big city is kind of rough and tough, because you have to fend for yourself, and you've got to make a name for yourself, and you've got to make a living and protect your family, and having all these people together in one place definitely forces you to have thick skin, right? But some of the nicest people in the United States I've met have been from the Midwest. So I did this speaking tour a couple of years ago where I started in New York and I finished in San Diego, and I went right through the heartland and I did like 22 or 24 speaking events in 28 days. And I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was in Iowa. Like I was all over the place, and you just meet like the sweetest, nicest people in the world because they don't have, maybe they don't have passports. They they don't have any interest in what's going on in the rest of the world, but they'll treat you right, and they're all about their local community. And I think that that's something that makes the United States incredibly special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I saw that in Oklahoma and Kansas City, Missouri, and of course when I went back to Ohio. So I do believe there are some differences in that level.
What was it like coming out to LA as this kid who says please and thank you, and being in LA with all these people who are just like fuck you?
Well, it was always that, but it was just even our language, even the way we talked, and of course the way we dressed was so different. I remember when I hopped off the plane, I thought I was just the thing, and I had these really big sunglasses that wrapped around, and I was like, wow. And I was wearing those jeans where you put them in Clorox and with a hanger, and it would come out washed like that. And I came off the plane wearing one of those, and they said, "Oh man, everyone just is a little different here." And so I had the tails in the back of the hair and the wave, and so but it was I think we assimilated quite pretty well.
That's good. Yeah, LA definitely sets the fashion trend.
That's for sure.
It doesn't come from Ohio.
And we came in through LAX. I'm like, well, yeah.
That's got to be epic. So so where in your journey did you decide that you wanted to, I guess, help people? I mean, where did that come from? Like, are your parents psychiatrists, therapists, doctors, or is that something that came to you through them, or how did you kind of stumble upon that?
A little bit of both. Yes, I do come from a healthcare family. So my father was a physician and built his practice. That's how I actually met my mom. My mom's a nurse.
So there you go, right?
And they met in Philadelphia when his training. They met, got married. And so, yeah, my father's is in healthcare. And my mom and my brother's also a physician. And my sister is a nurse, and then all of our spouses are also physicians. So the healthcare field is something that we've been around for a long time. For me, like I said, it wasn't a straight path. I was kind of going into law enforcement and so forth. And
was that sorry to interrupt, was that like before you went into university? Like, where'd you go to university?
I went to Cal State Fullerton, and then I went to Pepperdine University for a master's degree, and then I transitioned to Oklahoma in those programs as well.
Well, so what did you do at Cal State?
Cal State Fullerton?
Yeah.
I studied psychology.
Okay.
But I was also a pre-bio major, and so I was taking all those classes as well, and so just dilly-dallying there for a while, not sure what to do, and ended up getting a master's at Pepperdine in psychology, and then, like I said, I entered another PhD program that wasn't clinically focused, and just realized it wasn't a good fit for me. And then I transitioned at Oklahoma to the counseling clinical program. But I always had a sense, people did tell me that, hey, you kind of interact good with people, or you kind of have a good way of relating to people. You have good things to say, nice things to say, make people feel better. And that kind of really solidified for me when I was thinking like, gosh, what do I need to do next? And then was a nice transition. I think things just happen sometimes organically like that.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be, a psychiatrist or work in this kind of field, you have to be quite calm and, give out some positive energy and be, personable and be able to chat with people very easily. I mean, to think about doing all that schoolwork and not having those basic human skills of empathy and all this kind of stuff would be just a total waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. and yeah, so... But I think, it was a little bit of both. Environment I was around and attributes and kind of feedback from people kind of solidified that that path that I need to journey down.
And so where did you start your first practice?
Well, doing training and internship. So I actually was training with a psychiatrist for a while, getting my what we call postdoctoral hours.
And how many hours do you need before you can start seeing your own clients or patients?
Well, I was aiming for 2,000. California requires 2,000 hours. Some other states are less than that, 1,500. And I was recommended, hey, get your 2,000 hours because it's very hard to get those hours once you get your degree and to get those post hours. And so I was working with a psychiatric practice, and he was referring a lot of clients. He had a very busy practice. And so I was just taking whatever I could get. And he opened up a treatment facility for adults struggling with mental health or psychiatric conditions. And so it took off from there and did various things here and there. And like I said, right now I do 100% telehealth, contracted with various hospitals across California, and then private practice, and then do quite a few mental health spread awareness talks, and podcasts and so forth.
That's great. I find it, I just find LA to be such a great place for people to be doing anything in the business of like helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't mean to, how can I say this gently? Like, I just feel like there's so many people who live in Los Angeles who need help and guidance in some way, shape, or form, because I think the city puts so much pressure on people. You know, whether you're in the entertainment industry or the music industry, or whether you're just in a supporting industry trying to get from A to B every day in this crazy traffic with 30 million people, you know, in the surrounding area. And I just feel like it's just like a hotbed of mental health and stress and difficulty. And I think it maybe here definitely more than a lot of other places I've been to, all around the world. I just feel like LA is just this pressure cooker of intensity that just, it can break people. I mean, it doesn't matter how strong you are. I just feel like at some stage everyone gets a little broken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do think that what you mentioned earlier about the big city versus the smaller city, versus a high pace versus slow pace, I do believe those are those elements. And you're absolutely correct. I've worked with a lot of people. We're in this Los Angeles area, and they talk about the pressure of succeeding, work, and just environment. And so it just lends itself to that. And but just not Los Angeles. What we're finding around anywhere now around the world with substance abuse is so pervasive. Accessibility is very easy. The reality is the pandemic, believe it or not, was a huge factor in increasing mental health struggles. We're seeing a lot more people struggling with anxiety, insomnia, and depression, substance abuse issues as a result of the pandemic. And I do believe the pandemic was, at least in our lifetime, that one period of time where we can all relate. Mm-hmm. Right? That's when a pandemic, we could all relate. Someone either knew someone that was struggling or got infected or maybe lost a job. And I really do believe with the 8 billion people in the world that every person could relate on it affected people in some form or fashion. And I think there's silver linings there, and there's also some challenges and struggles as a result of that. But so in addition to like those big cities, it's quite pervasive that we're finding.
I don't mean to turn this into a session or anything, but I had a pretty tough COVID. But it's a hell of a story. You want to hear it?
Sure.
So I was traveling all around the world filming adventure TV shows, right? So, you know, in 1 year we filmed 8 episodes. We filmed in like Russia, Iceland, Laos, Papua New Guinea, Bolivia, Argentina, Jordan, and Uganda. Like that was like a normal year. And we were doing this for more than a decade. And then, so I had my own production company. I had about 10 people working for me, various freelancers, and then a few full-time people. And then I was living in Dubai because I was like traveling the world. And it's a great place to be if you're a global traveler. And then all of a sudden, the world started closing down little by little. Oh. And if I wasn't working, I couldn't pay my staff. And so if I couldn't get on an airplane and go to some far-flung place and film climbing a mountain and then sell it, like we didn't have any revenue, right? And then all of a sudden the world closed. And I was in Ethiopia filming when the world closed. I was in the Simeon Mountains without cell phone access. And then when I came out of the mountains and I got cell phone access, I found out like the whole world closed on me. And I kind of had an idea like, maybe not the best time to go to Ethiopia, but then I felt like Africa is going to stay open no matter what. Like African people are just ruthless about working and, going about their business. Like they're not going to let a pandemic slow them down. So I thought I could get into the continent of Africa and film a bunch of episodes there. The first one was going to be Ethiopia, but then the whole world closed down. And then people were saying, oh, because Africa is not closing down, they're not going to let you fly out of Africa into Europe or even maybe back to Canada, which is where I'm a passport holder. So then I ended up in Istanbul, Turkey, which was not my home. And then I ended up kind of stuck there for 4 months, just kind of twiddling my thumbs, doing absolutely nothing.
Wow.
As a global traveler, it really did become frustrating because I think the first lockdown, the first 4 or 5 months, 2020, we were all in it together, right? There was like this global like cheering, a hype man, right?
Yeah.
But then after that, that's when things got really frustrating because some countries opened up, some countries wouldn't let you go to here if you were there. You had to do this test for that. You had to do that test for that. And then it just became political, and then it just became about money. And that's like when things got bad for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And did you ever, if I may ask, did you ever get COVID?
I got COVID a bunch of times. Yeah, I mean, because I was traveling, I was trying to travel all through that time, and I was trying to keep filming all through that time. And but yeah, I had it a bunch of times, all very mild, no problem at all. And but still, it was so frustrating to see how certain countries would treat other countries because I was in Istanbul, right? And Turkey didn't close down really during COVID, so because of that, other countries wouldn't let Turkish people travel to their country. Because if you didn't lock down, you're not allowed to come to our country because we locked down, we're better than you, right? So then I was in Turkey, and then I couldn't get out of Turkey for like months because no one would allow me to fly to another country. So only when they started allowing people into their country from Turkey was I able to get back out and try to film again and things like that. And then I filmed for about 4 or 5 months, did a couple really nice shows. And then the second lockdown happened in November 2020, which didn't really happen so much in California, but Europe totally closed down in November 2020 for another 6 months, and then that just shut all production down. It was a bit rough.
I like how you conceptualize that progression because I think about it because it's been coming up in a lot of my work. Is that you're right? That whole come together as a community, 2020. I remember that everyone's coming together. People can't come to work. We're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs as for one person come together. We sacrifice, and all of a sudden, we started seeing little changes. You're absolutely right. And then we get to a point where that started fraying, and then, like you said, the political landscape started to show itself. And then you got people who weren't going back to work. And I still don't understand that phenomenon.
Yeah.
And is then people got certain bailout money, and then things started to get better again. And so I think what I saw in 2023 is those residual effects of the pandemic, whether it be, I have friends that are in healthcare, and I don't know if, to be honest with you, if they've ever, they saw a lot of loss of life. I mean, they were telling me all the time, and some of my friends and relatives are first liners in the ICUs. They were intubating COVID patients, and I don't know if they've ever went back and processed that, and there's a lot of that they're seeing. So we're seeing a lot of that, I believe, residual catch up to us. That all that energy, that adrenaline, but it's starting to come back in the form of anxiety, depression, insomnia, even loss of life or relationships that came about from that.
Well, I mean, one of the tough things for me is I had about 10 guys that I worked with very closely, like cinematographers, editors, post-production supervisors, music composers. These were all people that were helping me make my shows, right? And then when COVID hit, it wasn't just my production company that went under. It was like everyone's. And like no one was doing any film and television work, and then sure, the government gave everyone a little bit of money here and there, but at the end of the day, like it really still hasn't even come back yet. And all of these great friends that I had that I worked with to make these, beautiful travel shows, they've all kind of had to get jobs in other fields and other industries just to like pay the rent and get by. And a lot of them are not fulfilling their creative passions, and these are kids that like went to NYU and went to film school and stuff like that. And now they're kind of not getting to, exercise that, creative muscle that they were kind of trained to do. So I also feel like COVID, hit and then scattered people, and people landed in a lot of places that they didn't expect. And that may or may not lead to various versions of unhappiness. That's my non-professional opinion.
No, that's a very good assessment.
Yeah.
And people are still kind of lost in finding their their new self. And some people had to change careers. People had fallout relationships. But with anything else, I think there's silver linings as well. And maybe you can share that sentiment. But that's kind of one of the things I try to help people do is no matter what tragedy happens, a loss, there is a silver lining if we allow ourselves to go look for it. And so I do believe there are some silver linings for a lot of people that I'm hearing in terms of relationships got better. They got out of a relationship that was not the healthiest to a change of career that they'd wanted to do. And so it's important to look for those as well.
Absolutely. I feel like in a lot of ways, like the pandemic from 2020 to 2023, maybe it was kind of like a world war. I mean, obviously we have Israel, we have Ukraine, Russia, we have our own wars going on, our own real wars going on. But the pandemic was actually kind of like the way people used to talk about world wars, where, you weren't the same person going into that as you were coming out. And it's like you said, like I feel I have a lot of friends that either had babies, got divorced, or ended up with 4 cats.
Or dogs.
Or dogs, yeah. Like the pets were huge during the pandemic, right? So it was funny, but I don't have any friend that just kind of started in 2020 and finished in 2023 the same person.
No.
Like they're all just drastically different human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whether it be someone picked up hobbies or creations, and just to let you know too as well is I started to see people during the pandemic, because there's certain things we take for granted, that they just lost the gym. They weren't able to go to the gym, and I literally saw people who were very successful. Is that, hey, I'm distressed, man, and we realize that these things sometimes that are so ritualistic and routine that we just take for granted. We go to the gym, we do our thing, we chat, we work out, go back home and do our thing, and we don't realize how important that is. It's also so the not just the gym, but the dinners, the get-togethers, the movies, the small little chats, really had a collective impact. And sadly, too, I've known some people who their senior year of high school, the pandemic hit March 2020, and they didn't have proms, they didn't have graduations. First year of college, they didn't get to go to college, and so like I said, it's people are different in many ways, and hopefully in good ways. And later on when they try to work on those not so positive stuff.
Yeah, hopefully it's interesting. Yeah, I used to do a lot of speaking events at boarding schools in the Northeast and stuff like that, and I remember some of the kids would follow me on social media and stuff, and they'd write me like, oh, we had to do our graduation ceremony virtually, or I had to do my college entrance exam or my entrance interview like by Zoom. Like I didn't even get to go there and like meet people face to face, and they were kind of distraught by how inaccessible people were all of a sudden. It was quite terrifying.
And for the parents out there, wow.
Yeah.
Being a parent or a career person, and then all of a sudden becoming a sort of a teacher, that was really big for a lot of distressed parents out there. We were up to alone.
Yeah.
Setting up the computer and getting the child or children to focus. It was really big. That was one of the biggest things that we remember that caused a lot of distress, and teamwork, communication, sharing responsibilities. It really highlighted some attributes of a relationship, and hopefully in a good way, and but sometimes not in the best ways as well. So kudos to all the parents out there that navigated through that.
Yeah, the ones that made it through.
The ones.
Hard to laugh about it, but still, yeah, it's not easy. So when you came out and you did all your hours, your 2,000 hours, and then you were able to start seeing your own patients and have your own, like what did you decide to focus on in psychology, psychiatry, in that space that you wanted to really help people with?
Well, luckily the psychiatrist I was working with was very, very busy. And so the range of clients that I saw were a wide range of spectrum, whether it be different levels of depression, anxiety, traumas, other substance abuse issues, but especially working in the residential treatment facility. Residential meaning that it's like a home-based care where they live on the campus, or the residents, while also getting treatment there with 24-hour care. Saw a lot of varying diagnoses and levels of acuities there, and substance abusive issues and family dynamics. And so that's where a lot of insight and knowledge came from for me. And then I started to recognize that a lot of people struggle with insomnia. And so one of my friends, who is a pulmonary doctor and also specialized in sleep disorders, said, hey, you need to focus on this, what we call cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia, which is psychological treatment for curing insomnia. And so I specialized in that, and found that would be very helpful.
What are some of the reasons why people just can't sleep?
Well, some of the reasons, assuming that there's not a medical or untreated psychiatric condition. For example, it's very hard to get quality sleep if you have a prostate issue and you're urinating every hour or so.
Yeah. Or
if you have severe back issues or pain issues, or a psychiatric condition, if you have untreated post-traumatic stress or anxiety. But other than that, if there's not a significant untreated psychiatric or medical condition, really it boils down to bad habits.
Oh, really?
Bad habits. If the word we use is sleep hygiene, which are instructions to help you sleep better. But most people, they're engaging in bad habits. For example, the ones that are more popular is doing stuff in bed. Bed is for sleep and intimacy only, right? When you're watching TV, you're paying your bills, you're paying your taxes, you're reading a book, you're listening to music, you're on social media. The body and mind get confused of what the bed is for. The bed is for sleep and intimacy. And then again, a lot of times people spend too much time in bed, not sleeping. And so they get frustrated. And so bedtime and sleep becomes about anxiety and frustration and not about restoration and restfulness. So, but those are a lot of what I find. I would say over 80% of the time, it's just these bad habits that people engage in that perpetuates the non-sleep.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who have like sleeping issues, and a lot of it is because of bad habits, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell your people that a lot of sleep disorder issues aren't really apparent, right? Like sometimes people don't realize they're snoring, and their bed partner tells them, "Hey, do you know you snore, you stop breathing, or you talk in your sleep, or you keep jerking your arm or leg?" So for anyone out there who feels like they're getting full sleep, but they wake up tired and fatigued, other than seeing a doctor to make sure there's nothing else going on, might want to consider a sleep study because it monitors all these other functions going on. And like I said, a lot of people don't realize they have a sleep condition until someone else tells them or they get assessed for it through a sleep study.
How do you feel about like all this new technology we have, like with watches and wristbands and rings that like measure our sleep quality and our heart rates while we're sleeping and can figure out like when we're in REM sleep and when we're in deep sleep and when we're in light sleep? Like, is all this bullshit, or does this stuff actually work?
No. I actually data. It's really important. And so that CBTI, the cognitive behavioral treatment for insomnia, is very data driven. Meaning, we look at what time you went to bed, how many times you woke up, a lot of that data, and we calculate sleep efficiency. And it's the amount of hours you're allowing to sleep compared to the hours you're actually sleeping. Obviously, you want that numbers to be very close to increase your sleep efficiency. So, but no, those gadgets are important. I'm not too familiar. I know like a lot of these watches can detect movement, like an actigraph. And so usually if you're not moving, hopefully you're still alive. But
hopefully, yes,
you're not dead, but you're probably sleeping. And so if you're moving a lot, chances are you are having disrupted sleep. Just because you don't wake up doesn't mean you aren't having disrupted sleep. Speaking of Europe and traveling, did you ever, by the way, sleep in a hotel near one of those international airports?
All the time.
Oh.
Yeah. I made a living out of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they did a study one time for people, I forget which country it was in. I believe it was in a European country that lived near an airport, and people were complaining. They would fall asleep fine. They felt like they were sleeping 8-10 hours, didn't wake up in the middle of the night, but they were very fatigued. And so they gave them a home study where they monitor their pulse rate, any movement, and breathing. And what they found that every time a plane flew over their home, their brain activity would spike to the point of wakefulness. Not wakefulness to the point is where they become consciously awake, but they went from deep sleep to a light sleep. And so that was happening through the night, and that was accounting for why they were feeling extremely very fatigued and memory issues and brain fog and so forth, is because they weren't get deep sleep. And so just know that our brains don't turn off. They're just less active. And so noise, dishes, chatter, a cat purring, talk about cats, those can disrupt your sleep. Falling asleep with music or the TV, people say, "Oh God, it was so great. I fell asleep with my show on." But your brain is still attending to that data.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And so things like white noise, where your brain will tune it out, is really important, or consistent noise. But ambulances or that come by your house constantly, if you're near a hospital, your brain is still trying to process that data.
Boy, yeah, I mean, we live in Southern California, right? Like all the rich people are flying around in helicopters.
Unless you're in John Wayne Airport, Orange County.
Is there a curfew in Orange County? Oh, that's nice. I don't think there's one in LA for a curfew. There's helicopters flying around here all the time, man. Yeah.
In the Orange County Airport, that's one of the things, is there's a curfew.
Oh, that's smart. That's good. And I also saw you kind of specialize in substance abuse.
Yep.
Yeah.
I work a lot with substance abuse for sure. Probably, yeah, still to this day, but from the very start of my practice, and people struggling with various substances, especially these past few years, the accessibility, the different types of substances, it's a worldwide global issue.
It is for sure. And I think it's funny too, because for people watching internationally, like in California, you've legalized cannabis. So marijuana products, edibles, all this kind of stuff are now legal. So when we talk, I guess, about substance abuse, we're talking about harder drugs like cocaine, or even like things like fentanyl and Oxycontin, or all these other things, like where people have had some addiction issues. The fentanyl stuff is terrifying. Have you come across any of this? I guess people don't live long enough, right? Because once they take it, they're pretty much done.
Well, they're lucky because fentanyl is being used and tampered with a lot of substances because people can cut it. It's cheaper or accessible, and so. But yes, people are dying. It is a really, really huge issue, and people are dying with a small dosage. It doesn't take much to die from it. People can't stop breathing, and so forth. So it's a very, very dangerous drug. It's the really, really urgent topic, actually.
Well, that's so Janet Yellen is in China right now. She's the Treasury Secretary of the United States, right? Janet Yellen. I think that's. Yeah. And she's in China right now, and one of her major topics is the fentanyl crisis, because it's really funny if you think about it. Funny is not the right word. It's an interesting coincidence that the two things that are killing Americans the fastest, probably, you could make an argument for, is fentanyl, and the root chemical of fentanyl actually comes out of Chinese factories and gets shipped into Mexico. And then it gets smuggled across the borders into the United States and into Canada. Canada has a huge fentanyl problem also. And then the second thing that the Chinese created that are destroying the minds of Americans is TikTok. Yeah. So social media is a big problem too. But it's funny that both of these things have kind of originated out of China, completely focused on the U.S. market.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, boy, speaking of the electronic part, is they're looking at the addiction part. Is that information, this need for this accessibility of information creates this dopamine where if we don't get things quickly, so it just highlights and exacerbates that dopamine drive for satisfaction and all of that. And so that's what the challenge with these online social media and phones and computers is it gives us things very quickly. I mean, look at when we get something delivered. Literally, you can have something delivered within 24 hours, and so it's transformed the way we think in that immediate gratification. And especially with young kids, is that we work on that delayed gratification, but when they're getting that constantly being reinforced through electronics, it changes brain chemistry in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I nickname my front door the Christmas door because like every day there's something coming from Amazon. It's just like every day there's a package for you. Yay! There's groceries or something you need, bed sheets, towels, like everything just comes to you like just right. There's a very funny comedian. He's from Malaysia. His name is Ronnie Chan. He's on the Daily Show. Yeah, he also does some stand-up comedy. He has a hilarious bit about how Americans are just so used to just getting things quickly. And he has this whole like Amazon Prime, and he's like, Prime now, and he's like, Prime, just put it in my hand right now. Like, yeah. It's very, very funny, but it's true, like, because this kind of delivery doesn't really happen anywhere else in the world. Like Europe is much, much slower, not half as advanced in their logistics and package delivery business. It's crazy what happens in the United States, and people I think are actually becoming like addictive to shopping online, as well as all other social media. Yeah,
for sure. And just the idea of getting something right is not just because it saves time, but there is something psychological that when we can get something that quickly, opening a box, seeing a box there, that's validating, or it's satisfying in many ways.
Someone loves you.
Yeah,
if they send you a box.
Exactly. And so. But yeah, there's some real big issues, and like you said, the substance abuse issue, the fentanyl issue is really huge. People are dying at alarming rates, and so I'm glad to hear that she's representing and trying to do something there.
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem. What other parts of your practice do you work on a lot with people beyond beyond insomnia and substance abuse? What are your other kind of key kind of helping blocks that you work on with people on?
Well, the biggest one that I've been doing, but I'm starting to really formulate it, is a family crisis intervention. And not the type of intervention where you gather the support system, the family, and sit down the person who's struggling and get them to get help or get treatment. But it's kind of the step before that. Family crisis intervention, meaning that these families have a loved one that is severely struggling. They don't know what to do. They're paralyzed. They're stuck. And so a lot of what I've been doing and helping coaching is get these families to have a unified vision, because that is the hard part. Whenever I see people come to treatment, the treatment facility that I was at was like a 45, 60, or 90-day treatment. Getting them there, number one, is a huge step. But what's really critical is what happens when that person leaves there. If that family system hasn't grown or changed or transformed or involved in their own recovery, the chances of long-term success greatly diminish.
Because they get the help they need, and then they just go right back into that toxic environment.
Exactly, because a treatment center, when it's a good, diligent treatment center, it provides things like structure, routine, and accountability. Those are very significant attributes that I find across people who continue to progress and people who struggle. And so they're there, they're being monitored, they're taking their medications, they're eating well, they're sleeping well, they're absent from their substance of choice. And so that's sort of the easy part in some respects. But if they go supplant themselves back in that same dynamic with that spouse or family dynamic with parents, and it's still that toxic environment, their probability of success greatly diminishes. Doesn't mean they can't be successful, but their probability greatly decreases. A lot of risk factors.
Yeah, I mean, how much do the people around us really mess us up? Like when you really think about it, like family members, friends, the circle of people you work with, like they're either like really a positive influence or they're really pulling you down.
And the ironic part of that is I saw a lot of different family dynamics, dysfunctional family dynamics. And those families that are still involved and care about the person struggling, believe it or not, they were coming from a good place. Just because you come from a good place doesn't always mean it's the right place or the best place. They come from a loving place, and that's where part of their treatment recovery as well is to recognize that and recognize what their patterns are and how they've contributed. There's a saying in the recovery arena is you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, you can't control it. But I say you've perpetuated or enabled it in some form or fashion.
Yeah, because any relationship you have with anyone enables you or affects you in a positive or negative way. There's no neutral relationships in this world where we're all just bumping into each other and nothing's happening, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the law of physics, right?
Yeah.
Something is going to change.
Absolutely. It's so hard to it must be so challenging to kind of sit and listen to all these stories and have to unpack, years of trauma to try to figure out where these problems really lie.
Yeah, that's true. Finding the starting point, the etiology, and that's important. And that's where everyone's individual part is. And so, for example, imagine a rowboat, right? Let's say there's 5 people on there, and those 5 people are the person who's struggling, and you got the intimate family members, that could be parents, siblings, or what have you, a spouse. What I say is everyone on that boat, if there's 5 people, have to assume no matter what, if you still care and you're still invested, no matter what happened and how you got to this situation, they have to assume 20% responsibility if they work 100% on that 20% of responsibility, because everyone contributes. Have you been on a rowboat before or anything like that where there's...
No, I avoid that shit like the plague. No, I will never go on a boat with people. Tug of war, yeah.
Tug of war. Okay, so I used to tug of war in college, during those intramural sports and so forth. But with a tug of war, everyone is very different, talented in weight and athleticism, but everyone has to work 100% on their shared responsibility. And like a rowboat, the way you maximize your speed and distance is if everyone is doing 100% of their part, of course, in synchrony. And that's the same thing, is we sometimes assume the person who's caused the most damage and most harm has to do the most work. But in that intimate circle of people, if you want systemic change with that family unit, everyone has to assume equal responsibility, because everyone contributes, right? Whether it be a parent who's uneducated in mental health or grew up in a dysfunctional environment themselves, everyone contributes something. and both positive and not so positive. And so everyone has their share of responsibility to work on.
So I have a good friend of mine who this past summer, 2023, he rowed a rowboat. There were 4 of them. They rowed a boat from Monterey, California to Hawaii, and it took like 40 days. And there were about 15 boats that did this trip. Like there was kind of like a group of boats that did this trip, and he was on one of them. And he was just shocked at the mental health crises that occurred on all of these different boats. Like there was no boat that got was unscathed by the time they arrived in Hawaii. Like there was one boat where they had one rower, and this particular person on like day 3 just decided to hide in the sleeping cabin and stayed there for the next 37 days.
Wow.
And didn't get out, didn't row, didn't communicate really with the rest of the crew, and just didn't want to be there, completely disappeared. Like other crews like had fights and turned around on day 7, and the ones that did made it, like there were very few, boats of solidarity after 40 days. So I feel like putting a bunch of people on a rowboat is just a great microcosm for the society that we live in, and just to see all these mental health challenges that exist when you put people in small places under huge amounts of stress.
Yes, and they've done studies like that before, and but yeah, it's people crack, so to speak, and it shows our threshold, and that's kind of what I work with people, is basically increasing that threshold. Like for example, I guarantee your threshold for forgive me for not knowing rock climbing language, but of holding on to something, right?
It's hard to let go.
Well, I'm sure your threshold is a lot greater than mine. Like if we were to hang somewhere, but doesn't mean you were born like that. You work towards that threshold, just like in jiu-jitsu. If you come to jiu-jitsu mat, having someone full mount you is uncomfortable, pressing their chest against your face, cutting off your breathing. My sense would be that I would be able to sustain discomfort in that level probably than someone who hasn't trained in that.
Much, much better than me, for sure, yeah.
But the point is you're not born like that. You develop that threshold, and that's one of the things that I work towards people I think we grow up, I think one of the reasons why substances are so pervasive is we've grown that pain is bad, discomfort's bad, get away from it, take a pill to get rid of it, anxiety is bad. I believe culturally, don't know if you know this, but
that kind of feeds into the pharmacy. I feel like that kind of feeds into the economics of our society a lot too. Like if you don't feel good, get a doctor to prescribe a pill, buy a bottle of alcohol, smoke a joint, go to the shop and get some edibles. Like I feel like there's such an easy out for us to have to just spend money to make ourselves feel better, right? I feel like that's so ingrained in our society, maybe more than any other society.
Yeah, I mean, you're much more well-traveled than myself, and I can only speak, of course, to where I most live in the United States culturally, and I do believe that. I believe things, I mean, the marriage, right? If marriages aren't well, we have, I think, I don't know where it compares globally, but one of the highest divorce rates.
Oh yeah, above 50%.
Above 50%, and of course, there's legitimate reasons and so forth. But what happens is if something gets uncomfortable, we jump ship, right? We end the marriage or relationship, or a job's not well, we leave the job. I don't know if you know this, but do you know what percent that the United States accounts for the opiate use, whether it be legal or not legal?
Probably like 90%.
No, good. 80%. 80%.
Yeah.
80% of the opioid use accounts for in the United States. Does that mean other people in other countries don't have discomfort and pain or anxiety? Absolutely not. But I think it's, I do believe in my general conclusion in the work that I do is our level of sustaining discomfort is quite low. And so one of the biggest treatments for any type of phobia is moving towards those, reaching a level of comfort in those uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
And so that's the treatment of choice for separation anxiety disorder with kids, assuming that they're not being bullied or anything like that. You keep sending them back to school for separation anxiety disorder, right? Because they will increase that threshold of navigating to that discomfort. So, yeah.
I've definitely noticed in coming back to the United States how much of like a pill popping culture is here. Like if if people have anxiety or they have insomnia or they have some of the issues that you help people work through, I feel like a lot of people are just looking for like a quick fix, right? Like, I have anxiety, give me a pill, I'll take it. Forget about this, forget about learning about what the side effects might even be, right? I'm depressed, give me a pill. I can't sleep, give me a pill. But what about your diet? What about your exercise? What about your friendship circle? What about your primary relationships? What about your, do you have the love of a pet nearby? Because they'll always love you, right? Like, like what are the things in this person's environment that you might be able to be tweaked beyond just popping a pill and staying in that potentially toxic situation? I think, there's so much more to be done, but everyone just seems to want like a quick fix.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great techniques for things like that, and I'm not saying there's a lot of techniques to do that, but you're right. That quick fix it's easy. It's of course if it's accessible and cheap, of course we're gonna avoid that pain. But I want to tell people that
it's the Amazon Prime of pain alleviation.
Yeah. What I tell people all the time is there's pain, there's benefits in pain and anxiety. Anxiety comes from a survival instinct, right? It's what makes you make sure that your gear is appropriate and secure, right? And not frayed.
You double check the harness. Double check the harness.
Your harness is not frayed, and so forth. So people don't realize that mild to moderate levels of anxiety, there's actually survival mechanisms for that. It's when it becomes severe and disimpairing and paralyzing, but that's what makes you prepare for a job interview, that level of anxiety. That what makes you make sure you have all your scuba gear when you're going down under. It's what makes me prepare for a competition to make sure that I'm in the best shape that I can be. And so that's what one of the things I like to communicate with people is when you feel anxious and you're in a healthier mindset, that is data, that's information, that's your body's response to something. It's the equivalent of the check engine light. Right? It doesn't mean to panic and make a decision. It just means, hey, there's an alert system. There is physiological reasons for emotions, and it's an indicator of something.
I do a lot of events all around the United States, all around the world, speaking events and things like this, small rooms, big rooms, auditoriums, whatever. And I've become kind of like addicted to the anxiety before a live event. So I know that I'm not really nervous because I know my stuff and I've done it so many times, but there is like that kind of anxiety that creeps up. It's the hairs in the back of your neck. It's that, but I see that as being the body like getting ready to go into combat. And I feel like what that does is it switches on everything in my body and everything on my brain so that I can be at like a peak performance during that 1 hour that I have to go out there and talk or whatever like that. So when I feel that anxiety kicking in, and obviously it's not debilitating anxiety, it's kind of like, I guess, whatever you would call like a healthy level of anxiety, but it's actually become quite exciting to feel it kick in, and because it's almost like flipping the switch, on a fighter plane and having the whole thing come to life and all the buttons are turning on in front. I've watched too much Tom Cruise and Top Gun, but like, that whole thing of turning on this great machine so that it can run at peak at optimum performance, and I've grown to kind of like love that feeling.
Oh no, and I get that all the time. Before you get on that mat, sometimes you're at the point like, why am I doing this, right? But it's exhilarating, and when you're able to channel that, when you step on the mat, boom, everything is, all the people there, you don't even see them anymore. You become hyper focused. It takes you to next level. I think it takes you next level emotionally and in many ways. So yes, being anxious, being fearful, don't get rid of it right away. It's data information to reassess, reevaluate.
Yeah, and don't dampen it, right? If it's not debilitating, don't try to stamp it out, because like you said, you can learn something from it, right? Yeah. Okay, so you've given us way too many jiu-jitsu references not to get into this properly. So So when did you start your jiu-jitsu career?
6 years ago. 6 years ago.
Oh, I thought you would have started way earlier.
No, 6 years ago. 6 years ago. I was in that time of after graduating and working, and actually my brother, his son, was training in jiu-jitsu. He said, "Hey, I had my daughter Chloe, who's 16 now, but back then she was 7." I think Chloe would like this because she's kind of likes that sports and rough stuff. And so she tried it. And after, a few months that I was watching her, and I said, what, this is something I might want to do. And so I tried it. I enrolled in it, and it was addicting. And yeah, I did it. And she competed as well. And to have a daddy-daughter bonding moment 2 months in, which is very soon, she asked me to compete with her as well. And so I did 2 months in. And so ever since then, I've competed every year. And it's just a beacon, just like with you, when you're climbing, there's that beacon that you strive for. I need that. For me, honestly, I don't think I could just train without having some type of beacon to work towards.
Yeah, that's interesting. So have you always been athletic? Have you always been into sports, even from a child? I mean, you grew up in Ohio. I mean, that's like football country. Do you ever play American football or anything like that?
I wasn't allowed to, and I think this is it all coming back. I wasn't allowed to wrestle or play football. I don't know if it's because my parents are in healthcare, but of course they didn't want me to get injured. So soccer, my whole family played, well, at least my brother and sister played soccer, but as a whole family, we were really competitive in tennis.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Tennis is really big in Ohio, so we went to training camps, travel for competitions and so forth. So that came about, and then I also did some Taekwondo, karate, and did some fighting tournaments there as a kid. And then college happened and intramural sports, and then so jiu-jitsu was kind of my reinvigoration of that martial art and competitiveness. And I do plan to start competing back in tennis again.
Have you seen this Break Point on Netflix where they follow all these young tennis players that are all kind of like up and coming, like not the Nadal, Federer, Djokovic guys, because they're old. Yeah, and Federer's retired, but they made this beautiful series on Netflix where they follow a few men and a few women, and they're supposed to be like the next generation once Nadal and Djokovic retire, and follow Federer. And it's amazing because these young kids are just under so much pressure, and the mental stress that they're undergoing up against like a Nadal or a Djokovic, or just trying to balance like sponsors versus what they see on social media versus, their next opponent. And all this kind of plays in, and you just see like how fragile these minds are. Like, even though they're built like gladiators, and they can hit a ball faster than anyone else, but they're mentally struggling so much week in, week out at all these tournaments. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah, it can be a highly burnout sport, especially on the singles level, and the pressure you get. And it's I mean, to really advance, I believe you need to go to camps, get the individual lessons, private practice, private lessons, and so forth. And so it is a tough sport. And of course, and like in any sport, not everyone makes it.
Yeah.
So you have people going homeschool and tennis day in, day out, and it's tough on the body, playing on the hard courts, tough on the body, the joints, and everything else. But I might have to check that out, though.
Yeah, there was a lovely man on the podcast a few weeks ago. His name's Christian Straka. He's a former professional tennis player, and he came on and chatted with me. And he had to retire because of a shoulder injury, but then he got into tennis coaching. And then he moved away from tennis coaching, and then he just became basically like a mindfulness coach. So he started just dealing on the mental level of playing tennis and helping these players, because he didn't want to travel all the time with the players to all the tournaments, because he found that quite exhausting, although he did work for some very high-level players as a coach. But he found like a real niche for helping them deal with all the mental anxiety and stress of that. So he kind of like rebranded himself just as a mental health coach, I guess, which you would say, because he's kind of seen it from all the different levels. He's not a certified psychiatrist or anything like that, but he does kind of help them get out of their own head. I think get out of their own way, I think, is the best way he described it.
Yeah, sports psychology is huge as well, and you see that a lot now with mixed martial art fighters, where they're implementing mental health coaches. And just what I talked about earlier with the family unit and the level of pressure that I've witnessed and seen, and gratefully I was not falling under that pressure. My parents were very supportive, but you see a lot of working with the families. The mental health coaches have to work with the families because of the demands they put on them and the pressure. And so I remember my parents watching us in our matches, and you could just see the level of intensity and stress and nervousness. And so winning, and that puts a lot of pressure on the kids. And tennis isn't a cheap sport either, right?
No.
the travel, the lessons, the rackets, and all that. It's not a cheap sport either. So there's a lot of pressure on those kids.
Interesting, yeah. And it's funny that you've kind of gone from a racket sport to jiu-jitsu and then maybe back to the racket sport because those are totally different things.
They are, and luckily and humbly, when anything come racket, I just pick up like ping pong, badminton.
Have you played squash before?
I have not played squash, and paddleball is not on my radar either.
And this pickleball thing.
Pickleball is not on my radar.
I tried to play that once. It was really hard, like much harder than tennis. Like,
well, you know me, I like that satisfaction of being able to put the ball away, and pickleball you can't, right? No matter how hard you hit it, doesn't matter, and nothing to take away from that, because I think it's great. It's great social, and it's competitive as well. I'm looking more into it. I've seen videos of a mini tennis that I don't know what kind of ball they use, but they use rackets, but it's just a mini court, but you can hit the ball and pass and put balls away. So I'm curious about that.
I think pickleball is just for people who like tennis, but they don't know how to serve, because you can do that underhand serve to start off, and then after that it's just like it's almost like ping pong, like just back and forth, and then you can play it off the back wall, which is a little bit like squash, which also kind of doesn't make sense. Yeah, I struggle with that.
Well, for me, again, is it doesn't really differentiate, because you can play with someone that is very athletic and someone that's not, and they can hang with you.
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah. When you're way more fit than the other person and they can stay in the match with you, that is the most infuriating thing in the world.
Yeah, and they can. You can't put it away and so forth. They can hang with you, but that's just personal preference, and I think tennis is going to be my thing.
So what? I mean, what were you going through when you decided, like, I need a physical outlet again, like jiu-jitsu, to come back into your life? Like you said, you were kind of graduating, finishing all your studies. Like, what was it that kind of, was it just the family connection, or were you like hungry for some like new challenge?
I wasn't really. I work out a lot too. So I've been always strength and weight training. So that's been my thing, and that was my outlet. There was nothing. I wasn't going through any midlife stuff. There wasn't anything like, God, I'm missing something in my life.
Because jiu-jitsu is a great midlife crisis excuse, right? Like, because it's like, I got to hit something. I've got to throw someone on the ground and jump on them. Like,
it can be. It can be. But it wasn't. It was just simply my daughter saying, hey, can you train? And so I just did, and it just organically happened, and it really is, as you may know, with the things that you do in rock climbing, it's addicting. It's addicting because they call it, jiu-jitsu stands for, believe it or not, the gentle arts. It does, but it is a mental chess game, and the benefits that you see with people. I've seen a lot of people who've. Thank you.
Yeah.
But you get all kinds of people. You get people from military veterans that are looking for the camaraderie, and they've looked at all over it, to people who had physical injuries, to people that went through some traumatic events. And it's just more than just that. I think culturally it's really huge. I mean, you just really, when you're training with people, there's a great deal of trust that goes in there, whether it be for a male or female. Kind of the positions you're in takes a lot of trust in the person you're rolling with, and it gets you comfortable in your own skin and so forth. So it is a mental health attraction for a lot of people as well that have endured certain things. And I've seen people, one of the professors, Professor Steve Summerman, he's 70 years old. He was a bodybuilder, and jiu-jitsu has said has been the healthiest thing, that keeping him fit and strong and so forth. And so you see a lot of people who are all various ages, but some people older who started late in life, and they report feeling stronger, more resilient and healthier, especially for the mind. They call it the mental chess game, because you're always figuring out what's next, how to get out of this move, how do I engage in that move. And so you're always thinking.
So how much of your own practice and in dealing with your own patients do you talk to them about being outside, exercising, finding a physical outlet like jiu-jitsu, or even just walking or hiking or running? Like, the amount of people I've talked to on this show, plus also friends I've known who have kind of got out of negative spirals in their life through running. has been spectacular because they just needed that freedom and that form of like meditation to kind of just clean their mind and kind of wash out all the anxiety and stuff like that. And I mean, do you prescribe similar things to some of the people you see on a regular basis?
Absolutely. So just a little background is I believe there's generally 3 but 4 areas of someone's overall well-being. There's the physical self, right, which is our body, what we do with our body, what we put into our body. There's the mental/emotional self. Then there's the social self. Social is everything outside of us. That's relationship, career, extracurricular activities. And then there's the spiritual self, right? The spiritual self can embody a higher power, a God, but not necessarily. It could be just a higher purpose and meaning. So I believe those are 25% of our well-being. When people struggle, I believe they are not attending or deficient in one or more of those areas. And so definitely the physical part, because getting out walking or what have you, an activity engages in the physical, mental, and the social component and the spiritual component. What you do as well is so absolutely the physical part, the mindfulness techniques, mindfulness meaning staying present in the moment. That could be a walk, meditation, guided breathing exercise. Those are really critical, important, because if you're not taking your body, it's very hard to work on your mental. If you're not working on your mental, it's very hard to work on your body and so forth. So those are 4 pillars I believe are critically important to someone's overall well-being.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, I consider myself to be fairly well balanced, I suppose. But if I miss the gym for like a week, I find like my mood swings and my anger levels can fly off the handle like super quick. Like all that stuff, just everything is kind of in place at the moment, which kind of keeps you nice and balanced. And then the second you pull one of those blocks out, you start to feel the dips and the swings a little bit more. It's so important.
Well, we have natural opiates in our bodies called endorphins. That's where you get a lot of people who are in substance recovery. They engage in a physical activity, whether it be running, whether it be whatever else, is we have those natural opiates. It's that high you feel after a run or a rock climb or a jiu-jitsu roll or what have you, is we have those natural opiates. And so it's not just going out of the gym and getting out. There are a lot of processes going on, and that's definitely one of them that's really important to recognize.
Mm. One of the things you mentioned earlier was about how you work with patients and how you work remotely with a lot of patients at a lot of hospitals all around California. I'm curious, like, how long has, California hospitals been doing this remote therapy work? And is it something that has just come out from the pandemic, or was it something that was happening before the pandemic? And how hard is it to assess people remotely, like through telemedicine? I know nothing about this. I mean, I fucking hate, sorry to swear, I hate Zoom calls. I mean, yeah, if someone's on the other side of the world, yeah, but when someone's in fucking LA and they want to have a Zoom call with me, I lose my mind. I'm like, come on, I want to shake your hand. I want to meet you face. Yes, we're all busy. Okay, fine. But everyone has time for a coffee, right? And so it drives me crazy. Now, I'm just curious, like, how this works in the mental health field.
Well, for me, I was doing teletherapy before the pandemic. It was starting to really become popular. Wasn't mainstream at all. 10, 15 years ago, there was a need, right? Because we had some patients who have a disability. They can't go physically to an office. You have some rural areas that don't have accessibility. You have people with mental health issues that maybe have agoraphobia, which they're hard to leave the house, or they have a level of intense anxiety. So I was doing teletherapy beforehand. That's why when the pandemic came, it was nothing new to me. It was just another transition of more clients. But I do believe the pandemic really developed a comfort for a lot of people. At first, it was very difficult for people technologically. I want to see people in person, but it created a level of comfort because it became mainstream. It was an out of necessity. Now you get people who love it, that rather prefer that over in person. I do believe, and that's why also...
These are the people who still wear masks at the grocery stores, aren't they?
I didn't do a study on that yet, but you might get onto something.
I just not to make light of obviously a serious issue, but yeah, it's funny. Like, there's still people out there who wear masks and are afraid of other people, even 4 years on. And I'm sure these people are very comfortable not leaving their home or communicating with everyone via a screen, right? Yeah.
But well, like in the workplace, right? You got a lot of people who are companies and organizations were recognizing, hey, we're saving a lot of money. People are being as productive at home and more satisfied. But we're starting to see a little bit of people wanting to go back. We're starting to see productivity start to diminish a little bit, and companies are wanting people to come back and that interpersonal connection. And so we get a lot of people who still want that, whether it be a clinician or therapist that want to see someone in person or someone that prefers that in-person engagement. So there's quite a few people that still desire that and prefer that. Does it present challenges? Absolutely. You know, being in a room with someone, there's just so many nuances that happen in a room. Like if just seeing someone physically, and there are some things that we miss. Of course,
I think sorry, like I think so much of our communication is nonverbal, and I don't think the screen translates it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. One thing, if I may see that what has been a positive part is you understand the client on a contextual level. What I mean by that is I've seen so many pets, so many kids, spouses, environments of where they live. People have shared their art with me. People have taken me on tours of their homes. So, and you don't see that obviously in person. And so that's been one of the biggest benefits, because you can see things and you see sort of a better understanding. I have this one young client. She's 18 years old, and she has all these 80s rock band posters in her background. I said, you really like that music? That was the music I grew up with. And so you learn so much, a lot about people as well, those little nuances. But like anything else, there's those positive things, attributes, and deficiencies as well.
That's interesting. I never thought about like being able to pull more context from a patient or from a friend or something like that based on their environment at home where they're chatting with you from. That's interesting. That's a new one, because most people are just trying to mask it like we are here with just, you know, curtains or something like that, or even the fake backgrounds that blur everything out, right? So they don't want anyone to actually see where they are.
Yeah, that. But can I tell you an interesting thing of where this lent itself very positively? I was seeing a client who was depressed, and he was coming with his adult son into session. And the reason why he was struggled is he had his wife had left him. And his wife had left him. And what I noticed immediately in the first session, it was him and his son in session, and he was struggling with the loss of his wife. And I thought this was maybe recently and so forth, where she had left him in the relationship. And one thing I noticed immediately, and I would have never seen this if I was in person, is there was a wedding picture, right? A wedding picture. And I said, can I ask you something? Who is that in the wedding picture? He goes, that's my wife. How long have you been divorced? It was over 25 years.
Oh my God.
And I said, that is a challenge.
That's where we're going to start today.
I mean, I don't know. Look back at it, that was early in my career. But I said, that is what we need to focus on. By having that reminder there every day makes it very, very difficult. That's like wearing the wedding ring.
Yeah, you're never going to move on if you have to look at something like that every day from someone who left you 25 years. Like, you're going to remember that every day for 25 years. Like, that's the worst thing you could possibly do to yourself.
And I'll be honest with you, he didn't come back. And so, but I'm hopefully I planted a seed with him.
Yeah.
That, hey, because sometimes you hear things in sessions that you may not want to hear, but hopefully I planted a seed as, hey, or maybe his son said, Dad, come on, it's time. So that's a positive of something you'd see that you normally wouldn't.
Yeah, that's wild. It's so strange, like how the brain works and how we interact with people and who we get attached to, who we want to spend time with, who we don't want to spend time with, who hurts us when they leave. You know, when we rejoice when other people leave. Like, it is really a wild ride, and it's so complicated. Like, I don't know how anyone figures it all out.
Mm-hmm. That's the life game, part of it at least.
So, I mean, what do you have on for 2024? I notice you've published a book, you're doing talks, you know, you've kind of made a real reputation for yourself in Southern California. I mean, I'm just curious what's on the horizon.
Well, the horizon is, yes, on May 1st, I'm releasing my book. It's how to get your resisting loved one into treatment, and it's a step-by-step plan for people struggling with mental health or addiction crises. And so, in addition to my talks, in addition to support groups, what I found that there were so many recurring themes that people would struggle with, like, for example, my loved one doesn't think he has a problem, or my daughter struggles with suicide. We're afraid to set boundaries, or we're afraid that if we tell the person to get help, they're going to just leave the house. And so we get a lot of stuck families. And these questions in my interventions recommendations were just so thematic with them. And people were asking me, hey, do you have this stuff in a pamphlet and so forth? I said, I said no. And it finally got to my thought to my mind is, hey, I should, since this stuff is so formulaic and so thematic, why don't I write it down somewhere? And so the thought was there like 7 years ago, and it was in the pandemic.
And those are your chapter heads right there.
Yeah, those are my chapter heads, and it was in the pandemic. I remember March 2020, where clients were just canceling. Boom, boom, boom. I'm sure you remember that day. Actually, a tournament got canceled. One of the biggest tournaments got canceled the week before. UC Irvine, jiu-jitsu tournaments. And so I was just sitting there with a blank screen, like, what is going on in this world? And it was a spring day, and then I just looked at my calendar with all these cancellations. I said, you know what? This is the time.
This is the writing time.
I started typing. I just started typing, and it was literally the narrative in my head, the question. And so that was the organization, because I realized how, like I said, structured and formulaic these groups were. And
it's funny that you see the same things like repetitively, like because everyone thinks that their problem is unique to them. But you're meeting hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people over your career, and you see patterns develop where, it's like, you have the same thing that this other person had 3 years ago. Like we're not all that different is what I mean, I suppose. And it's funny that you saw these patterns enough that you wanted to just write a book about it.
Well, humanistically, that's one of the things, the power of a group, right? So anyone that has an opportunity, I think group therapy, group support groups, and anything in a group dynamic, I think is one of the most humanistic things we can do. There's a level of connection and accountability. But one of the things I always share with people is you get so many people who are diverse, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status, belief systems. But what brings them together, the common thread, is they can all relate. Someone may not have a substance abuse addiction issue, but they have difficulty coping. Someone may not have lost a loved one to suicide, but they know what grief and loss is. They can feel what grief and loss is. And so that's the power of these groups, is these common threads that they all share. And so what I wanted to do was write something different out there, because I get a lot of families who are paralyzed, and it's what I wrote about was all the missing knowledges out there, the must-knows, the disease, conceptualize the disease, and what are the attributes that differentiate people who continue to be successful in the recovery process and who don't. And so that's where it all came about.
How many people do you meet who are just like, no, I don't have a problem, I'm fine?
How many people? Well, then again, that's a little bit, that's a little loaded, because a lot of people I meet in therapy, they have a problem. so that, and then a lot of people who, like my friends, I don't delve into that unless they ask me. But I would say there's a percentage of people that don't share, that deny something, or don't realize how severe or significant something is. But what I tell people all the time is, with the level of the different range of people I've worked with, from low education to high education, low socioeconomic status, high socioeconomic status, or whatever it may be, you put up the roof on anybody, there's issues in any family unit.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I can just remember situations from my childhood where, a family member, would never go to therapy. Like, would never even consider that to be part of the solution. And then I think now, I don't know, I think now there's much less of a stigma around mental health, getting support for mental health, especially since the pandemic, because I feel like a lot of people suffered during that time. And I think like now kind of the stigma is off. Like, I mean, like 30, 40 years ago, like, were your neighbors in therapy? Was everyone talking about their therapist and what they worked on that week? No. But now I feel like it's kind of everywhere. Like, I just feel like it's become much more mainstream to seek out help.
Yes. Yeah. And the silver lining again is, whether we use social media or in the United States, is especially in the United States, is we're seeing a lot of movement towards destigmatization, right? And there's, I think, other cultures in other parts of the world are making some changes, but I do believe there's still some challenges. But in the United States alone, I'm seeing a lot more people of different races that you would never seen before, different cultures, different religions, and so forth coming into therapy. And I think so we're seeing that, and that's because a lot of people are talking about it. I'm always big on when a high-profile person, whether it be a politician, an athlete, a singer, actor, when they come out, they are essentially saving lives, because what they've done is they've normalized that it's okay to talk about these things. Because sometimes we have the logical brain and the emotional brain. Logically, we know, like these high-profile people, actors and athletes, that they're people just like us. But the other side of the brain says they're these untouchable people. They're above human. And when people talk about their own vulnerabilities, when the Robin Williams came out,
that was terrible, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, and it was so pervasive culturally. I remember seeing in the news this young girl was crying. She was about 7 years old, and it's like, why? Well, Robin Williams, he was my parents in my era, and because he was Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get people that grew up with him in the Mork and Mindy days, and of course all the time in between. But whenever something like that happens, it really can literally save lives. When some actor talking about their suicidality, their depression, their sobriety, their struggles, it really does. And I do believe in the United States we are seeing a more rapid destigmatization of mental health. And I know we talked about social media. A silver lining of social media is people are more openly talking about their mental health struggles, whether it be the TikToks, whether it be the Instagrams, the YouTube. And it really, really, when someone looks at that, they feel less alone, more normalized, and it really can, it does save lives as well.
There's a beautiful documentary on, I'm not promoting Netflix here, by the way, but there just happens to be some decent stuff on Netflix. I just haven't been that busy these days. But there's a beautiful documentary on Netflix. He's a Scottish singer-songwriter. His name is Lewis Capaldi.
Okay.
And before COVID, he was huge. He came out with this song. I can't remember what it's called, but it was like #1 on the Billboard, even in the United States. And he was touring the world in 2018, 2019, and COVID hit. And then they made this documentary of him during COVID, getting through COVID, writing his second album, and then releasing it. And it's funny because he's very open kind of about his mental health challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and he has this anxiety which seems to like increase some Tourette's syndrome that's in him, and he has this like shaking shoulder, so it causes his body to move involuntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that's very strange when he's doing a television interview or when he's on stage. And there was one performance, he was at a festival and he was shaking so much that he couldn't sing the song, and then everyone sang for him. It was beautiful. But he's come out and really addressed this and like made a Netflix documentary about it. And I just feel like that kind of stuff is so much more out there in the space now than it was before.
It is, and it's because of those social medias and so forth. And so there is goodness that comes out of some of these things as well. And just like anything, the advent of the phone, good stuff and not so good stuff. The advent of electricity, good stuff and so forth. And so that is a huge, at least in the mental health space, has been a huge, because you reach so many people. And so I started doing mental health shorts as well. And I get nice. It feels very validating, and when you get comments like, "Hey, thanks, that really helped." And so,
what are the rules about using social media to spread medical information? I mean, I don't even know. Are there any rules? Like, can you help diagnose people via social media, or can you give people practices and tips of things that they should work on via social media? Like, is that something that doctors are even allowed to do?
Well, in terms of diagnosing via social media, no, you would have to have an intensive interview. But giving tips, recommendations and stuff like that, absolutely. Especially if it's in line with in good faith and not meaning any harm, no intention to mean harm. Yeah. And so, like, for example, I did a short talking about just honesty, the importance of honesty, and how critical that is. And so I don't know the specific guidelines, but as long as you're well intended and not meaning harm, then yeah, I think it can reach a lot of people. I think there's a lot more positive benefits than vice versa.
Yeah, I just think the more information that's out there and the more people that you can kind of see that are going through something that you're going through, and then meeting the right people who can help you work through it. I guess there's no, that's all positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Total aside, you mentioned Robin Williams. I gotta talk about Robin.
Okay.
So he played a seminal role in my life when I was a kid, and he was absolutely phenomenal. But there's one story that I heard. It has nothing to do with mental health at all, but I just wanted to share it with you. He did this live stand-up comedy tour over the course of an entire year, and it was in the 80s. I think it was like late 80s, maybe early 90s, and he went on tour around the United States for a year, speaking, doing talks, doing his show in all these different clubs all around the U.S., theaters and things like that. And it finished at the Met in New York City. And they called it Robin Williams Live at the Met, right? And they filmed it, and it's on, you can watch it. I think it's on, you can definitely see it on YouTube, right? It's like 2.5 hours long. And it's some of the best stand-up comedy ever. And people will kind of revere it as being one of the greatest performances of all time. But the thing about Robin was he was on tour for a whole year, and he had a producer with him, and he had some people around him that were working with him. And since his death, these people have come out and talked about how much they loved Robin and how much they miss working with him and how much of a creative force he was, right? And one of these producers came out and said, well, I was on tour with Robin that whole year. Like, I was producing his tour. And he says, I worked with Robin on his material. We talked about it every day. I was at all his shows. He never went more than an hour 15, like, on any of his shows. Like, he was in and out, 75 minutes, like, thank you, everyone. See you next time. I'm Robin Williams. Good night, right? And then when he did the Live at the Met thing, he did 2.5 hours of stand-up comedy. And he said, and this producer guy, he was like, and the extra hour and 15, he goes, he'd never heard it once before. It wasn't like part of the other material that he like used sometimes and then cut. He was like, it was all fresh, coming out of nowhere. And he said, like, he's still like, that was probably the greatest improv stand-up comedic performance of all time.
That's what he was known for.
Yeah.
That's what he was known for. An amazing talent. And exactly that is whenever I brought that up, I remember that period of time specifically when he passed, that was the topic for the whole group of all the groups I had, whether it be the substance arena, the support group, because it really affected people. I think his passing was very significant on many levels because of just what he meant to people, just like that as well. And and seeing that little girl talk about him really signified how impactful someone can be, right? And I do believe that if you are somewhere of a high-profile recognition person, I believe you have a social responsibility.
Yeah, to let people know that you're not okay all the time, which I think is pretty common for everyone.
Or social responsibility to spread good messages.
Yeah.
If anything, if even if you don't struggle, but to spread goodness.
One of the biggest issues in my line of work and with people around me was the death of Anthony Bourdain when he killed himself in 2018, right? And he hung himself in his hotel room, and obviously he was dealing with some addiction problems and definitely some mental health issues as well. But he was so busy and so popular and so well loved that people didn't really ask him how he was feeling, right? They were just kind of bouncing around from one place to the next. And it's funny because, like, I think sometimes when you're in the entertainment business, and I kind of maybe felt this a little bit at one stage where you're just traveling so much, you're meeting so many different people all the time, you're filming so much, you really do get disconnected from like society, and it's not like you feel like you're above it, but you lose track of it, right? And I think that can be very dangerous to someone who already is dealing with some of these issues. Like, I think if you're a pretty well-balanced person and you know where your problems are and you know how to deal with them, and then you're kind of drifting around the world for a few years, making TV shows, doing live events, and all this kind of thing, I think you can kind of stay grounded along the way. But if you're not properly tuned up and you're going out doing that kind of stuff, I think it can be absolutely destructive.
Yes. It was probably a perfect storm that lined up for him. And these diseases are a disease of isolation. Substance use, mental health, it thrives in isolation. It hates fellowship. And so I don't know exactly what his circumstances were leading to that. But when people start straying away from fellowship and recovery, that's when the disease amps up.
Where did you see the increase of substance abuse, specifically alcohol, during COVID? Did you see like a huge ramp up of that because everyone was like making light of it, right? It's like, hey, I'm working from home. It's 10 a.m. A glass of wine, cat, on the keyboard. People were kind of making jokes about it in the early days, but I think it got really serious, and not a lot of people are really talking about it. And I think a lot of these people are still struggling with it because, alcohol company sales went through the roof. People are drinking way more than they did in 2019. And I'm just curious if you've seen any of this in your practice and with people that you're communicating with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alcohol, especially because it's accessible and so you definitely saw that it was a social, it was a way to social. People were having Zoom calls and drinking, having a glass of wine.
I did that. Yeah.
Yeah, you did that. So, yeah. And of course, also what went up too were prescription pills for sleep as well during those times, and anti-anxiety medications. But yes, definitely alcohol, among other substances as well. Marijuana, definitely was a heightened increase. And
how destructive is alcohol if you're dealing with anxiety or mental health issues? I mean, it might numb the pain, but it must have just terrible consequences.
Well, what I tell people all the time when they use a substance or some type of coping mechanism that's not healthy, 3 words. Why they do it? Because it works, right? You wouldn't do it if it didn't work, right? That's why someone choose one substance over another. It works for what it was originally intended for, but it obviously becomes dysfunctional as you get tolerant and need more of it. It becomes counterproductive, but it works. But yeah, alcohol definitely is very destructive. I believe. I mean, also, a lot of substances are, but I believe alcohol, when abused, is one of the most pervasive substances. It affects every cell of the body, right? Whether it be your liver, your kidney, blood flow, your muscles, your brain. I remember someone was telling me one of her partners was drinking excessive alcohol and had to have some type of brain surgery because he had a tumor, and the doctor had commented that he smelled alcohol in the brain. And
he smelled alcohol in his brain.
When he cut open the brain, he smelled a strong, pungent smell of alcohol. And it is just one of those substances, and that are when taken to excess and abused, really, really have huge impact. You can die from severe alcohol withdrawals. Usually, if you have chronic alcohol use, you have to be detoxed. But for anxiety, it takes the edge off. Right? It does. Absolutely. It makes you a little bit funnier and happier, but it can also have a rebound effect for insomnia as well, right? It can put you to sleep, but when it wears off, you're going to wake up. But definitely can heighten anxiety because when that effect wears off, that symptom that you've tried to mask heightens up even more, and it's a depressant. So as well,
it's strange too because I think like a lot of people they start in with alcohol like at an early age. And I feel like a lot of people probably drink a little too much in their early days because of like social anxiety. Like I don't fit in, maybe I don't look as pretty or as handsome as someone else or whatever. So I drink to make myself feel better, look better or something like that. And then the crushing weight of life hits you in like your late 20s and 30s and you're dealing with parents and you're dealing with spouses and maybe you're dealing with children and you're dealing with work and and then I feel like that's when things really start into that like coping mechanism space. And then of course you add COVID and you're teaching your, 7-year-old kid mathematics and your 8-year-old kid science and you've got 2 pets and you're trying to do Zoom calls and everyone's like wearing masks and wiping their groceries with wet wipes. I mean, I just can't imagine like what that would have been like.
Yeah. And so, and just if I can say this as well, even I work in substance recovery. I'm not against alcohol, opiates, even THC. I'm not against those things because there are people out there who can have a glass of wine with their dinner or steak or lobster or whatever else and not be a problem. There's some people that can smoke some marijuana for anxiety or for insomnia and not get dependent on it. There's some people who can take a regimen of painkillers and for a back surgery and not get dependent on it. Just to let you know, by the way, if you're 40 times more likely to transition to heroin with just one use of painkillers.
I used to be
home regimen. Yeah, that was because heroin's popular, because of course fentanyl, because it's cheap and it has that effect. And so but
40 times. That's insane.
40 times more likely to potentially transition to heroin with one regimen use for painkillers.
On a personal note, my father had hip surgery a couple years ago. So he's in his 70s, very active his whole life. His hip had needed to be replaced. So he had hip surgery, and they gave him some Oxycontin or something like that, right? He took one pill, and he was so high, and it was so terrifying. He's like, fuck that. He poured them all down the toilet, and he was like, that is the most dangerous thing I've ever had in my entire life. And he's just like, I'll take the pain. But that, like, and he had the strength to not take another one. But I remember him telling me, he's like, that was terrifying, that kind of punch can be packed in that little pill, and that they're giving like a bottle of 40. And he's like, holy,
exactly.
It's like, that's not good.
Yeah. And so exactly what I was saying though is, but if you have a history of substance addiction or a family history, or you have a mental health condition, a mind-altering substance can make you more sensitive to an underlying condition, can bring about the condition sooner or later, or it can worsen your resistance symptoms. And so that's one of the things I always tell people. It's like, oh, well, hey, I think I can manage my marijuana or my alcohol and so forth. I just tell them of the heightened risk factor alone that we have to be mindful of.
Yeah. And what's that comment? Like your substance abuse isn't abusive until someone like close to you says, hey, you're a bit of a dick, or, you're doing that too often, right? Like if you're just out having like a glass or two of wine, with dinner, and you're fine, no problem, right? But when you go and have 4 bottles and you fall over and run over the waiter or the valet guy, then you got a problem.
Yeah, no problem.
So let me see this book of yours, actually, and so we've got it there, and it's how to get your resisting loved one into treatment. So how hard is it for like a mother or a father to get their kids, or for for spouses to convince them that, hey, like, you really do need some help? Like, how big a leap is that first visit to meet with someone like yourself?
It can be very difficult. It's I think it's one of the most difficult things, and that's kind of where this book was geared towards, is more like the people who are what I call in crisis. They've tried all the different steps. They've tried the soft touch. They've tried the tough love. They've tried all kinds of different approaches, and they're desperate. They don't know what to do. And if this person doesn't get help, sooner or later, something really bad's going to happen. They're going to harm themselves, harm others, be institutionalized, commit a crime. And so the people that I reach at that point, they're sort of done, right, so to speak, but they're still scared. I mean, I tell people all the time, some of the best language that I can hear from an individual that is ready to change is, I'm done. Not done living, not done trying. It's like, I'm done with this lifestyle. Some of the best words that family members can say to someone is, we're done. Not done loving you. We're just done supporting this unhealthy lifestyle. So the families I get they're at reached a point where they're kind of done with this lifestyle, but they're still scared and afraid, and they don't know, because of these assumptions or potential consequences that they're fearing about. Like, oh, well, like I mentioned earlier, well, gosh, if we put them in treatment, they may never talk to us again, or they may might harm themselves. They may go in a rage. And so what happens is we just stay paralyzed. And there was a psychiatrist who was a trauma surgeon prior to going to psychiatry. He used a lot of military terms, and he said, this disease will hold you emotional hostage. And that's what he said, and that's what he by the way, he ended up going to Africa for rock climbing.
Oh, there you go.
So, but he would use those terms. That's very true. It resonates with a lot of people. Yeah, they feel hostage. This disease, this entity, is the one having the chess pieces. They're the ones dictating. They're the puppet masters in all of it. And our job is to say, hey, to re-empower the families again and recognize what power they have by changing their strategies.
I think that's so important, because I feel like so many family members just don't have the tools to help their family members get help. Like, and I think too, like, naively, they think like, oh, if I put pressure on them, or I ground the kids, or I give them ultimatums, that somehow, like, they'll just kind of turn and listen to me and get the help they need. But actually, like, ultimatums are obviously the worst thing you can do, probably. Not speaking professionally about it, but like no one responds well to an ultimatum, right? So someone who is sick and may need help probably won't respond well to an ultimatum. And I just feel like those family dynamics, I mean, if you're dealing with a friend, like you can have an intervention, like you can get some other friends around and be like, hey, clean up your shit. Like, we're here to help you. You're a great person, that kind of thing. And, but I feel like the family is just so much touchier. It's way harder, I think, to get things done inside a family unit.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, the dynamics that are happening within the family. You want to hear another silver lining of the pandemic? I know you like talking about that.
I love it because the pandemic was, was traumatic for sure. But yeah, I'd love to hear more.
So one thing that I realized, a human condition is when you take away the element of choice, we don't like that, right?
Yeah.
Element of choice. So wear the mask, don't wear the mask. Social distance, don't social distance. Get the shot, don't get the shot, whatever it may be. We did that. I had literally clients. I was doing some teletherapy in the mountains areas, and I had clients that their issue was they never left the home, right? They're anxious, they're depressed, they don't want to leave the home, they isolate. And all of a sudden the mandate came, right? The governor mandate is you got to social distance. And all of a sudden they want to leave the house, right?
Yeah, because all of a sudden, what, you're taking my choice away?
Yeah, exactly.
So to be at home was my choice.
Yeah, so now they want to get out. I'm like, I told them, I said, we've been working for a year, and I've been telling you to get out of the house. Now we're telling you, you got to stay. Now you want to get out. And so we recognize that. So the reason why that's important is I work with a lot of families with that is what you tell people is, hey, we're going to love and care about you. The boundary is that we're just no longer willing to support this lifestyle. So it gives them the choice that, well, if I don't get healthy, then I'm not going to have this in my life, whether it be family support. But if I do get healthy, this is what I can gain. And so that's where I teach families to do is you give them the option and give them the power to decide by telling them what you're willing to be a part of and not be a part of.
I think this is such an interesting generational moment for mental health because I feel like, so for example, my father's like 75, 76, 77. Anyways, but his generation would never visit a therapist, and there was a stigma around it, right? And then like my generation, I feel like is coming to terms with this, as being really important and more, and the way our society is developing and the way our world is changing and the way the news media hits us. There's a lot more things that trigger us, and there's a lot more events in our own life, and I feel like mental health now is like a common thread for a lot of people, so it's not a big deal. And then, of course, for people who are our age, if we have children, we're passing that on to the next generation. So I feel like within the family unit, you've got, the non-believers, and then us as transitioners, and then, the next generation that will grow up with therapists, whom they might see more than their friends. Like, you don't know. But I feel like we're in the middle of a massive wave at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you are correct on that. And that's what I was saying is that you see that come alive when you have this generation of actors and high-profile people talking about their mental health, their gender identities or transitions and so forth. And so there's a lot more comfort in people. There's not so much repercussions for it, and there's action that if you can't discriminate with someone because of something. So there is a huge generational shift that's taking place right now.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today? I mean, I'm blown away by our conversation. I'm so thankful you swung by today. But was there anything specific that you wanted to chat about?
Not anything specific.
Yeah. So you're gonna get me into jiu-jitsu then?
Absolutely. Hey, you live in LA here. There's tons of schools out here.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. If you ever want to come down to Irvine area, come visit my school. Love to have you there and try it out.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much also too for the book. I will definitely give it a read. I appreciate it. I'll see who around me is resisting, and I'll see if I can get them in. But no, thank you so much for swinging by. I do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And now we can go to the wide one and shake it out. Great to meet you, man.
Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're done.
Yeah.